In this video, I'm driving a 1983 Vauxhall Cavalier SRI Mk2, but has somehow found its way to New Zealand, which is nice. So this Mk2 Cavalier was imported into New Zealand in 1986 at 3 years old. It is quite an early Mk2 Cavalier. The Mk2 Cavalier came out in 1981, a complete ground up fresh design, also sold as the Opel Ascona in Germany, and it was kind of General Motors' first world car. So there was a Holden version, the Holden Camira, sold in Australia. There were Chevrolet and Plymouth versions, I think, in America, based on this same platform with different running gear. And the Cadillac, don't forget the Cadillac Cimarron. Go and look one of those up, if you don't mind. Mk2 Cavalier, I have done a Mk2 Cavalier before, but the one I drove was from Vauxhall Heritage's own collection. That was a very late CDI automatic. So this is an SRI, and I think it even has the same engine, 115 horsepower, 1.8 litre, and this is the sporty version, hence the rather blingy wheels and a bit of extra trim on the bottom of the chin spoiler, and mostly the difference is inside, to be honest, where we find these marvellous Recaro sport seats, lovely checker upholstery, and I'll just straighten the steering wheel. I always forget, a chunky 3-spoke steering wheel. Very Vauxhall of the time, otherwise not much to give it away. We've got a boot spoiler, and because this is an early Mk2 Cavalier, it still has the rear wiper on the passenger side. They moved that over to this side in 1984, but these early ones lack that. The SRI also gets you this matte black rear panel. In about 1986 they fitted a tail blazer, so a bit of trim that looked like the rear lights continued all the way across. Quite smart, I thought. But yeah, let's have a look inside in more detail. Door test. Yeah, not all that reassuring, to be honest. Vauxhall were never the best for interiors. But yeah, oh yeah, I'm sat in very snug bucket seats. So we've got a few extra dials than you would have had in lesser versions. We've got charge meter, oil pressure. Apparently we've got some oil pressure now, even though the engine's not running. That's very impressive. Water temperature and fuel gauge, and a rev counter, of course. You wouldn't have got that on an L. We've got an extra light here for the towing electrics. We've got front fog lights that don't seem to be fitted, and rear fog light, not actually a requirement in New Zealand. This is your light control, and a pull out, bring on the interior light. There is a sunroof, but I don't know where the switch is for that. We've got electric mirrors, it seems, down here. I wasn't expecting that, but yeah, the owner hasn't ever been brave enough to open the sunroof, and I don't think I'm going to be the first to do that either. So even though this is a fairly plush SRI, we've still got a few blanking plugs. I'm not sure what those would have been used for, really. Horn not working because we haven't got the engine running, I assume. Not got very much in the way of extra lighting going on. And the hazards, which are slower than the indicators. That's quite impressive. Heated rear window. Oh wow, that's a proper parping horn. I like the sound of that. We've also got an original cassette player, which is very nice. Wonder where the speakers are. Oh, there's the speakers in the dash top. You see the dash top's cracking. That's because this is a New Zealand car and conditions here are somewhat harsh. Little quartz clock, very noisy, very flimsy glove box, heater controls, which seem to move around a little more than they should, and some of the markings are missing, but nonetheless they're there. It's very similar to the headlamp control, and this really takes me back because I grew up with Mk2 Cavaliers in the family, and yeah, I spent many a happy hour sitting behind the wheel of a Mk2 Cavalier, operating the lights and wipers and trying not to flatten the battery. Speaking of which, we probably should operate the wipers. Let's see if the screen wash will function. Yes. And pretty decent wipers. The blades aren't too hot on this example. That takes me back. So much screen wash I wasted over the years. Good overlap, no triangle of doom. The blade could come a little closer to here, but maybe would on a really wet day. It's a very, very dry day today. Bad news is the rear wiper does not operate. But nonetheless, most things do otherwise. We've got manual windows, even though this is sort of a luxury car, and it's manual locking as well. And we can do a good comparison here, because earlier in my New Zealand adventure I was driving a BX GT, a very close rival to this car, and the BX GT had power steering, which this car does not. It had electric windows, it had air conditioning in this market, but it did not have fuel injection. And despite being a slightly smaller engine in this car, it has more power, 115 versus 105, I think. And as well as generally the better running of a fuel injection car, less faff. You just get in, start it. Although the cold start is a little temperamental on this particular example. But yeah, these bucket seats are amazing. I never sat on such fine seats. Lots of bolsters to sort of keep you in place when you're hurtling, as you must do in an SRI. So a nice place to be. Well, how does the back compare? Well, there are no bolsters in the back, so there's nothing to stop me sliding around. We've got no centre armrest. I don't think they ever did on the hatchbacks. I think that was very posh saloons only, possibly GLSI upwards, not sure. Reasonable leg room. It's not too bad. And interestingly, I wonder if that's a lumbar adjustment or something. That's a bit peculiar to have a little knob there. I hadn't noticed that. Keep fit windows in the back also, but because there's a good generous quarter light, the window goes down quite a long way. Might actually leave that down because it is blooming hot, and the hatchback is not helping in that regard. Quite light and airy, but by heck, it's warm. It's warm back there. Let's go and have a look in the boot. Now the boot is a good size, lots of space there, but you'll note this high lip, something that plagued the Mark II Cavalier throughout its life. We've got a filler for the rear screen wash, sadly inoperable in this example, and a parcel shelf that unfortunately the ties are broken. But it's a good space, it's just not very easy to actually get into. Under the bonnet we find Vauxhall's new overhead cam engine in transverse layout, so 115 brake horsepower from 1.8 litres. No 2 litre option at this time in the Cavalier's life. The 2 litre would come later along with a 130 brake horsepower option. This being an early car, it's just a simple 1.8, and yeah, a lovely looking engine, I think. It just looks so simple and accessible. I've got a remote brake booster. I imagine there's a transverse bar going across from the brake pedal on this side, and of course McPherson strut front suspension. Oh, that's quite a lot of roll. Yeah, I think I can firmly state that the Cavalier SRI is no sports car. I think really it's a little more than dressing up. You could get this engine in the CDI and I think possibly the GLSI, so it was possible to have the same amount of shove and much the same handling in, oh, where's fifth gone? There we go. In a car that didn't have the sporty trimmings. It wasn't an out-and-out sports model, but really the Cavalier was built to absolutely monster on motorways, and despite being a sports car, because it hasn't got very short gearing, it actually cruises really nicely. At 60 we're doing a touch over 2000 revs, so I imagine if anything it's probably a bit more comfortable than the BX was. That was a little fussy at speed. Lovely comfortable driving position, great visibility. These cars were built to cover miles. Now some quick Cavalier trivia. I've seen pictures of Cavalier production at Luton, just north of London, that show a Cavalier two-door. I have never knowingly seen a two-door Cavalier other than the convertibles, which were built in Belgium by a coach building company there, but based on the two-door Ascona body shell. I have seen two-door Opel Asconas, just like I've seen two or three-door Sierras. I think we'll get off the main drag here. This road isn't really doing much for our test, is it? But there you go, just a little bit of Cavalier trivia. Oh yeah, you have to turn it so much, the wheel. Yeah, and the engine doesn't stay on song because of the gaps in the gears. Yeah, I'm not being entirely won over by this car. It's very nice, it just doesn't live up to that SR badge, I don't think. See, I'd be quite happy with a Cavalier LX. They came later, oh sorry, you're slightly falling off, in the Mark II's history, and were very much a dressed up L, just given all the sporty SR treatment. I think that's probably the way to go. I think you're going to have more fun bombing around in one of those. This feels like it should offer more, but doesn't. It really is just a fairly ordinary Cavalier, but with a little more trim. I mean, the seats are very nice and all, but I think I'd feel a little bit hard done by if I'd paid for an SRA back in the day. Still, it makes an entertaining noise, and performance isn't sluggish. It's just, I think the tall gearing makes it feel a little more sluggish than it really is. There was also a non-fuel injected SR version very early in the Mark II Cavalier's history, but that one didn't last so long. Oh, popular spot for doing donuts, this one. But we're in a front wheel drive car, so we can't partake. Yeah, it's not cornering that inspires confidence, really. So as a sports car, this is really an out-and-out failure. As a nice family car with some sporty touches, it works. So there we go, that was the Mark II Cavalier in SRI form. A bit lukewarm rather than a hot hatch perhaps, but they're certainly pleasant to drive, and you can certainly see why they were such a massive success. Ford thought people would be wary of front wheel drive in this market sector, and Vauxhall wiped up as a result, because actually it's fine, it drives really nicely, there's nothing scary about it. Sure, you don't get the rear wheel drive kick out of a Sierra, but yeah, this car was king for very, very good reason. When it comes to just being a car to drive down the road with a minimum of effort, but modern features like overhead cam engines and front wheel drive absolutely ticks all the boxes. So I should say thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store and buy lovely merchandise, and check older videos where you can find out about Project Invacar of all things. And I shall see you in a future video. Farewell.